Any questions? Oh, how good. Oh, I love it. Have a great session, and I'll see you later. Lunch is being served for this group here. I would love to be able to invite all of your students and everybody to partake of that, but we did not plan on them being in the building today. So I'll see you around lunchtime. Thanks.
I have some up in the room.
Great. Some people to introduce to you. It's become a tradition at Worlds now that we have a Chief Adjudicators panel, and they have been invaluable in giving me advice, suggestions, sometimes forceful, sometimes not so forceful. But I wanted to introduce them to you because you need to know who they are. If you have comments, if you have feedback that you'd like me to have or the organizers to have, it isn't always possible to find the one person, and it helps that there are quite a few of us. So let me introduce Helen Poliais from Greece. Irene from Scotland. Claire from New Zealand. To whom this PowerPoint presentation really belongs. I've just cribbed shamelessly from it. Chris from Canada. Another Chris from Australia. And James from England. Well, yes, there is JJ as well, who is with us in spirit and thinking about us. JJ Rodriguez is stuck in law school on the West Coast at the moment and unfortunately cannot be with us here. But he is thinking about us, and I promised him very long phone calls where I nag him about which person to put on which panel. So that may well happen. Why do we have the CAP? This slide captures some of it. You will get a lot of feedback from people as judges. You'll get feedback from teams, you will get feedback from coaches. Sometimes it will be very rational and very calm feedback. Sometimes it will be slightly less calm feedback. You will also have your own feedback from observations you've made of the round. We would like to know those things. Tell us so that we can keep making each round as we go along better than the last one. And that information needs to come back to us in order for us to act. We were talking earlier, before the competition, some of us, that we were telling each other war stories, and we realized that, oh, the CAP never heard about that in tournament X or Y. And there's nothing much we can do if we don't know what's going on. So we will rely on all of you to give us that feedback, and we do want to take as much of it in as we possibly can, within the ambit of the rules of the competition, of course. And like Phyllis mentioned, there'll be times with some of the DC schools where there may not be chairpersons or timekeepers. And having lived in Washington for a while, I know that some of their public schools do suffer from really quite systemic problems. When you have lead in the water fountains, having a timekeeper or a chairperson for a debate is not the biggest priority for an English teacher. So we may need to double up for those things. It can be some of us. If you find that the teams have extra speakers, they can do that job as well, as long as they're well briefed. I can't think of a better person than a debater to do timing. So we will need some help from the chairs of each round to do that. And the chair of each round will be very easy to identify. The first name on each panel is the chair. Okay? Now, why are we here? Some of you will have seen this from last year. And I think it's important that we remember what the role of adjudicators in these debates are. We're here to deliver results of debates, of course, and explain reasoning. But we have an educative role as well. We're here to teach and encourage and affirm the kind of things that the debaters do. And sometimes, when the cut and dry of a debate is going on, it's very easy to forget that there is this educational role modeling that we do. So I'd like everyone to just keep that in mind. I think it's crucial. And I think as long as we bear these things in mind, a lot of the ways out of dilemmas and conundrums and thorny situations becomes quite clear once we remember that this is our fundamental role. It's not to make everyone agree with us. Teams will often not agree with us, especially when they lose, but that happens. But if we can teach them something that is constructive and that they can take into the rest of the competition, then I think our role will have been played quite well. We are role models to teams like this one. Last year's champion of Scotland. This photo will of course change for next year. Because some of those people aren't back. So anyway, it's going to change. A quick word on the style. I think this you all know. We work with an international style that borrows and adapts from many different debating traditions, all very fine traditions in and of themselves. And whatever our philosophical agreements or disagreements with them, we have taken on certain aspects of each of those styles. No single country has invented it, although some of the people who invented it are around here. Yeah. And it's important, I think, to remember that it is this very, very global style. And it's a style that encourages us to be welcoming of diversity and difference. It compels a certain global thinking. And that's quite unapologetic, I think. We are deliberate in that we don't want a style that is purely national in respect to any specific country or region. Most importantly for me, at least, I think it creates international friendships. And one of the most fun things about coming back, as those of us who are now on our second or more competition will know, is the fun of seeing people again for the first time. And we've seen some of that with the debaters who've come back. We see it all the time with the judges and the coaches. And it's part of that community building, I think, that we have a big role to play in. So, there are, of course, opportunities for awards and travel and opportunities. This we all know. We may not talk about it very much, but it's nonetheless there and it's true. But, sorry. And also, of course, it provides a different way of looking at debates. I think this is important as well, because we often talk about the perspective of the average reasonable person. That is the person who is being spoken to in these debates. And here what Claire has, the phrase she's used is the average aware and analyzing audience member, your 4A person. That works as well. Right, any questions so far before we go on to talk about the mark sheet? We're doing this briefing slightly differently this year. In the past, we've done what style means, what content means, and what strategy means. And we found that many of you will know that. So what we thought we'd do this year is highlight the really crucial stuff that everyone needs to know before we then break out into some groups to deal with more specific issues. So the one crucial thing is the issue of the mark sheet and how we deal with the specific quirks and intricacies of the world school style. We mark out of 100, but really we're marking on a range of 20. No one will receive less than 60, no one will receive more than 80. And I cannot stress how crucial this is. This normalizes individual disparities in marking. You might think that for you, the best thing a debater could possibly get is a 95, but we will not give out 95s at this competition. And what will happen is if we see a 95, we will ask you to redo that. And then you will also judge the next round in the deepest part of rural Virginia. And you will have the bus leave half an hour before you come back. Just so you know. Not that we're vengeful or vindictive or anything like that. But it has to happen. Nothing less than 60, nothing more than 80. Whatever individual perspectives you may have on that will be important for your other competitions that you may attend, but not for this one. Okay? The same way there are no rules on accents, and everyone's accent is strange except your own. This mark sheet might seem strange, but it is the mark sheet that we adopt. And it is one that we as a CAP will come back to you with if you move out of it. Okay? Well, if you get the addition wrong, there are other creative punishments that, well, not punishments, we don't do punishments here. Just interesting forms of recrimination. Any questions on this? The style breakdown is quite, the breakdown is quite clear. 80% as a total, and then for style and content, which are each marked out of 40, nothing more than 32, nothing less than 24, even if it's the world's most god-awful speech. Or someone stands up there. Or there is improvement needed, yeah. So, but even if it is the most god-awful speech, then it is a 24, and there is improvement needed. That is the educational, constructive role that we play as judges here. But any questions on this? For those of you who find that this is a little new, and there are some of you who have not done this style before, not to worry, we will break out into smaller groups after this, and we'll go through some of these things in much more detail. But this is just the broad brush for everyone to make sure that we've all heard the same common briefing. No questions? Right. It is an extremely student-focused marking scheme. And it is done basically because you don't want someone receiving a 22 out of 100. And it's really quite demoralizing. anyone who gets a 61 is already sufficiently demoralized because they know that we're really marking out of 60 to 80. But we figure that there's no need to accentuate that with huge numerical differences. And as Claire puts here, we're increasing not just consistency but confidence and decreasing disparity and despair. I think that's very, very well put.
What would you do without alliteration?
Well.
I'm trying to think in a literary manner, so I'm giving up.
One thing that you will find on the ballot sheet, and those of you who've done Worlds in the last couple of years will be familiar with this, and those who haven't, we will talk about it. There is a column that says POI adjustment. And those are adjustments for speakers whose point of information performance is significantly different from the quality of their speech. If you find that the way that the speech is a 74 speech and you think that their POI performance was also above average, then there is no need to use that column, no need to make any adjustments. But if you find that someone gave a slightly below average speech but gave brilliant points of information, then you have some leeway to add on up to 2 points for the POI adjustment. Similarly, if someone gives a very good speech but offers no points of information, then that needs to be...
All the POIs are dreadful.
All the POIs are dreadful, yes, absolutely. Or they go on forever and ever, which is part of being dreadful. Then there is an adjustment downwards as well. So you can go up to -2 points. Now, since we allow half marks but not anything less, that means really that you can do plus minus half, 1, 1.5, or 2. Okay? And like I said, you only use this if there is a significant difference between the quality of the speech and the POI performance. If there isn't, that's okay. There is no need to use that column. You don't need to feel obliged to fill it in each time. Questions about this? Okay. One word about replies, or what is referred to here as the summary speech. It's marked out of 50 instead of 100, and different people have different ways of doing this. Some will just mark it out of 50, some prefer to mark it out of 100 first and then divide by 2. Whichever way you feel mathematically inclined, that is fine. We make no judgments, we have no preferences, as long as the addition is correct at the end of it. One of the dangers we found is sometimes judges will mark out of 100 and then forget to do the division by 2, and then you find a team winning by 400 points. Cannot happen. Okay? Right. Just to recap then very quickly, on our marking schedule we mark 3 major areas: style, the manner in which a speech is made, content, or the substance of the arguments, and strategy. How well they play their role and how well they work as a team. These we will go into more detail for those of you who haven't come across this style before, but for those who have, we just wanted to flag it here again. No need to go into huge amounts of laborious detail on this. And then again, the POI column, +2 up to or -2 in that range. Right. Quick word then on being on a panel and what that means. And again, in our earlier discussions, a few of us on the CAP thought it was important to mention this. We will go back to it again within the groups, but some things that all of us need to remember. First of all, your role in a panel, if you're not the chair, is to provide the chair with feedback for oral adjudication. You will make your decisions independently. You will give your ballot sheet to the chairperson of that debate, folded in half, given that it might be a coach, so we don't want to reveal everything to them. But let them take care of it. And you're going outside of the room then to do a discussion and provide your chair with feedback. Positive, negative, things that teams can do better. This then feeds into the oral adjudication. But you also give feedback to teams after the debate. And that's quite an important way, an important role to think about it, really. Because you want to both be constructive, but at the same time, when a team has weaknesses that need to be worked on, it is very useful to tell them, because if it's round 2, they have 6 rounds in which to make those improvements. So I don't think we should pussyfoot around weaknesses and issues that teams may have, but there is no need to be unnecessarily negative about it. And I think phrasing things in terms of, here's what you can do better, rather than, oh my God, you did this so disastrously wrong, is probably a slightly better way to do it. There will be, of course, strong team emotion sometimes. most of us agree that we don't want to engage too much with a team if the emotions are very strong, especially if they've just lost. And the real tactic here is please disengage, don't get involved in a protracted and extended discussion, but come and let us know that there is this very strong sentiment. Let the CAP know, and then we at least will be prepared when that very irate debater or coach comes up to speak to us, and we can then explain things to them. We will not overturn decisions. This is a well-established rule of the tournament. We will not do that, but there are other ways in which we can hopefully find redress for teams. There are also adjudicator feedback forms. So the teams get to evaluate you. They will not be asked so much, did we like the decision? But the questions they'll be asked will include things like, was the decision well explained? Did the judge give good reasons for how they went? And that, I think, is the crucial thing. If you, in good faith, can go to bed at night and go to sleep knowing that you've given good reasons for the verdict and the decisions you have, then that's all that can be asked of any of us. But just so you know, the forms will be there, and we take that very seriously. We do look at each of the forms, and where it is crucial, we will take action based on some of that feedback as well. The last two bullets on this slide, we call it the etiquette and decorum of dissenting. So not alliterative action. Don't tell him, Claire. But we thought it was important to mention this as well. When you are the dissenting judge, there is an etiquette involved. Your job when you go out and give feedback to the chair is not to persuade the other two judges, because you're probably not going to, given that the decision has been made. Your job is to present your perspective, and often we found, of course, that even with dissenting decisions, there is a lot that people saw in common with other judges. They may have weighed things up slightly differently, they may have prioritized things differently. And I think trying to find those common areas and the points of distinction and divergence are what we need to do during that time when you give feedback to your chairperson. It is not a time to try and persuade people. And it often helps also not to go on too long, because teams are waiting inside, they want to find out what the verdict was. We have a tournament to run and we want to carry on with the next round as well. If it's in the evening and it's the second round of the day, people are hungry, they need to get back and have dinner, so nobody wants to stay at a school in deepest, darkest rural Virginia too late. So there is a decorum in dissenting, and we hope that everyone will remember this. We will probably, have some experience of dissenting at some point. If not in this competition, then either we've had it before or we will have it at some point later in our experiences. But it's important to remember, I think, that this will happen. It's not something to worry about excessively, unless, of course, you are systematically dissenting in every single round, in which case some of us will have, more than a quiet chat with you, I think. But if it happens once here and there are strong reasons for it, then these things happen. The quality of the teams is getting higher each year, and the differences between some of the teams is narrowing. So it's probably not a bad thing that we see some disagreements on judgments. Now, on the other side, when you're in the majority, there is a way to deal with dissent as well. We hopefully will not have situations where, what is wrong with you? What are you on? What kind of drugs? Please don't tell us. We don't want to know because the US probably has them illegal. So there is a way to deal with it. And we don't want that sort of situation. We really think there is often room for that sort of legitimate disagreement. And judges in the majority will often, hopefully, be able to see that there can be a dissenting perspective, even if they don't agree with it. But we just wanted to remind people that just because someone is 1 out of 2 or 1 out of 5 doesn't necessarily make them wrong. I've often said to people that it is possible to get things right and be in the minority. But we, of course, don't have that happen here because the caliber of judges is just so high, isn't it? But if you also find that when you're dealing with dissent, that someone has systematically dissented, or that the reasons for the dissent are completely outlandish, and that a decision that some people in the panel saw very close in one direction, they saw in the complete opposite direction with a 10-point margin, that is a problem. And we need to address those things. The way to deal with it is not to try and persuade the person because that decision cannot be changed, but let us know. Okay? Please come and let us know, and we will deal with that as best we possibly can. Any questions on this? Yeah.
Just on a practical point, with the feedback forms, could you remind us, isn't the chief judge who's also responsible for distributing and collecting them?
No, what we'll do with the feedback forms, they're not in there. We'll have them at the main room of every venue, so teams can pick them up if they want to fill them in, and then come and get them back to the CAP. You don't have to worry about that as Chief Judge. I think we're putting enough on your shoulders as it is. Yeah.
We can't fill them out, can we?
Well, who's to know, right? Yeah, sorry, there's a question there, and then, yeah.
Does the chief adjudicator have to give the oral adjudication all the time, or can he, if he's the dissenting judge, can he give somebody else to do it, or he or she?
Great question. Not necessarily for either of those questions. If the chief has dissented and someone else is capable of giving the adjudication speech and feels comfortable doing it, great, they can. But the chief, as dissenter, can also give the speech, but making sure that he represents the panel and not just him or herself. Okay? I think that's an important perspective. So it applies just as much to another judge in the room doing it. We will talk about adjudication speeches in some of the groups. The important thing, I think, for that is whoever is giving the speech must make sure that they sound confident. What we don't want to have is a young, inexperienced judge who's been thinking, oh dear, I've actually done this before, goes in and does everything that you're not supposed to do in a speech. Stares at the ground, stutters, speaks too fast, reads from the notes. And it's a little difficult to accept constructive criticism coming from someone who so patently isn't playing by the same rules that we expect of our debater. So that speech needs to be given confidently, it needs to be given in a style that gives closure to the teams. Even if it's a decision they don't like, I think it's important that there is that sort of closure. Because what often frustrates teams, more so than losing, is when they come away and the judge cannot explain to them why. Or if they say, well, actually, it was really very close, so I just went on a gut. Even if that's what you did, find something else to say to them. Okay? I understand that that's what happens. That's how decisions can be made, because some debates are knife edge in that way. But it gives no satisfaction to a team if you tell them that. You might think it makes them feel better, but it doesn't. All that's going to happen is this kid is going to replay in their head that night what they could have done differently to change the direction of that gut feel. And it really doesn't help them at all. Okay? So, if there is systemic dissent from an individual, please let us know and we will deal with it. Any other questions? You got one, yeah.
Yes, it actually really strongly related to what you just said. If you could clarify once again, what is it that categorized as a good explanation? Because we did experience some judges who only said that, well, I'm simply not convinced, which is, I don't think it's a good enough explanation. So you might want to just clarify what is a good explanation. Thanks.
Yeah, we will cover that in the breakout groups after this.
Thanks.
Yeah, maybe go through some war stories and other examples as well. Any other questions? So there are a number of coaches in the room, and I thank them very much for coming. It's often useful to have them here as well. And I thought it was useful to say that as much as we stress these things to the judges, and we have expectations of all our adjudicators, there is an expectation on teams as well. Teams have every right to expect a level of competence from the adjudicating panel, but they also have responsibilities that come with that. And an overly emotional team that accosts an adjudicator or gets overly emotional just isn't helpful to the tone of the tournament either. And this doesn't often happen, but it happens enough that it is noticeable, and it's enough for us to want to highlight this. Judges have responsibilities, but so do teams. And I think it's important that we all remember that. Any other questions? Just to recap, why are we here? To deliver results, to teach, to encourage, and to be good role models. I'm not sure why Claire has good in brackets. Remove the brackets. We want to be good role models, both on and off the floor. And our adjudications, therefore, must reflect these important principles and priorities. All right. We've got to a stage where we'd like to do small group discussions. We found that these are actually the most useful way to really get people back in sync with the style. And what we've done is try to split people up into 3 groups this time instead of the usual 2. And because I'm from Singapore, we don't believe in too much freedom. So rather than allow you to decide where you want to go, Well, come on, the joke had to be made at some point, so I figured I might as well do it myself. So if you've been to 4 or more tournaments, then Chris and James, and when we say been to, really, we mean judged at 4 or more tournaments, or had experience in this style that gives you a very deep knowledge of it. At 4 or more tournaments, Chris, Erskine, and James will be working with you in this room. Okay? If you've been to 2 or 3 tournaments before, then Claire and Chris 8 will be working with you in the next room. There are connecting doors, so not to worry. And then all our shadow judges, which simply refers to people who have never judged at Worlds before. Okay. Yes, sorry, bad at maths. If you've been to 1, then I think you can go with, depending on how comfortable you feel with this, pick to go with either Claire or Chris. But if you're really not sure about the style still after the 1, well, I hope if you judged in Seoul or Cardiff that you feel comfortable enough with the style. But if you're not, then work with Irene and me in the other room. Helen is working with Chris and James here, I think, in this room. Yeah. Okay? Right, now just a note on what happens after the briefings. Lunch will be served at about 12:15, 12:30. So groups should aim to end by around then. What we're going to be doing is, we won't have a common session where everybody watches the same video and fills out a balance sheet and gives it back to us. What we will do instead is just have the shadows doing that today. And instead of the video, shadows will be judging the buy round. Some of you had. So what will happen is there are panels. There are panels for each of the buy rounds. Panels of 3, but we will split the shadows into those different rooms as well to shadow judge the buy round. And then what will happen is the chief of the panel, once they've explained things to the teams and the teams have left, will work with the shadows to go through the analysis of the debate and actually see what went right or not so right in the shadow adjudications. Okay, we thought it was important to do this. And those of you sitting at the back, you're actually sitting in the judge seats of the buy round. So the 3 individual tables are for the panel and the shadows will all be behind. We thought it's important to simulate not just listening to an argument on a video, but listening to an argument in a room with murmuring happening, with real debater speed at work, trying to make sense of all of those things happening around you at the same time. And we thought that was probably the most valuable way to do this. Okay? The other judges, we will not be requiring that you stay at the buy rounds. But if you'd like to, and need to be an audience member there, that's great, and we would welcome that. But only the shadows have to stay for the buy rounds. Well, and the members of the panel, obviously. Members of the panel, I have spoken to you, you know who you are, and we'll finalize venues and stuff like that during lunch. Okay? Anything to add? Claire? James? Okay, well great. Let's split into our groups then. Irene and I will take the new judges in this room.